WNBA owners did not spread their bets evenly. They pushed their chips toward one name and hoped the table would tilt with her. And now, as Caitlin Clark becomes the center of the league's future, some teams are realizing they were never invited into the plan. The shift began with quiet decisions that reshaped priorities across the league. Broadcast partners adjusted schedules, marketing budgets followed one gravitational pull, arena strategies changed, and ownership groups, some cautiously and others aggressively, began betting that Caitlin Clark was not just a star, but the engine that could finally push the WNBA into a new economic era. But guess what? When owners bet everything on one outcome, someone always gets left exposed. Clark's arrival did more than boost ticket sales and ratings. It altered how value itself was defined inside the league. Suddenly, franchises were no longer measured only by wins or player development, but by their proximity to the league's biggest draw. Teams tied to Clark's orbit felt momentum. Teams outside it felt invisible. That divide did not happen overnight, but once it appeared, it widened fast. Owners saw what the numbers were telling them. Games featuring Clark delivered spikes in viewership that the league had chased for decades. Merchandise moved faster. Sponsorship conversations changed tone. Media outlets that once ignored the WNBA now built segments around her performances. For ownership groups hungry for proof that women's basketball could command mainstream attention, Clark became validation, and validation is intoxicating. Hold on for what's coming, because this is where strategy turned into risk. Instead of distributing growth evenly, the league's economic gravity began clustering around select markets. Teams that could host Clark benefited immediately. Teams without that access struggled to keep pace. Scheduling quirks, promotional emphasis, and narrative focus started favoring certain franchises. Even if no one admitted it publicly, owners framed this internally as pragmatism. You go where the audience is. You invest where the return is measurable, but pragmatism has consequences. Smaller market teams, rebuilding rosters, and franchises without viral stars started to feel like collateral damage in a league-chasing scale. Their games were harder to market, their storylines struggled to break through, their players fought for attention in a media landscape increasingly dominated by one narrative. The most uncomfortable part is that none of this required conspiracy. It happened organically, through incentives and fear. Owners feared missing the moment. They feared that if they did not capitalize on Clark's popularity now, the window would close. So they leaned in harder. More promotions, more national coverage, more emphasis. And slowly, the league's balance shifted. Some executives privately worry that this concentration of attention is creating a fragile ecosystem. When one player becomes the primary growth driver, the league's health becomes tied to her availability, performance, and public image. Injuries matter more. Fatigue matters more. Every off-court headline carries disproportionate weight. That is a dangerous place for any league to live. But guess what? Owners are not known for patience when growth finally appears. After years of fighting for relevance, the temptation to squeeze every drop from a breakout moment is overwhelming. Caitlin Clark represents proof that the WNBA can command space in a crowded sports market. Walking away from that proof feels impossible, even if it leaves some teams struggling to keep up. Players on less visible teams feel the impact first. Fewer national games mean fewer endorsement opportunities. Less exposure means slower brand growth. Careers that might have flourished in a more evenly marketed league now depend on extraordinary performance just to be noticed. That pressure compounds frustration, especially when the disparity feels structural rather than earned. Fans notice too. Supporters of teams outside the spotlight question why their games feel secondary. They ask why narratives always circle back to the same names. They sense that the league's story has narrowed, even as its audience has grown. Growth in this case does not feel inclusive. It feels selective. Behind closed doors, some owners are uneasy. They see the short-term gains, but they also see the long-term risk. If the league becomes too dependent on one figure, diversification suffers. Rivalries weaken. Regional loyalty erodes. The WNBA risks becoming less a league and more a traveling showcase. That is not sustainable, even if it is profitable for now. Caitlin Clark herself sits at the center of this storm without controlling it. She did not ask owners to restructure their priorities. She did not demand that teams be left behind, but her presence accelerates decisions, and acceleration rarely allows for careful balance. Every league that grows too fast around one star eventually faces a reckoning. Hold on, because the quiet resentment is growing. Players and staff on overlooked teams talk among themselves about feeling forgotten. Coaches struggle to motivate rosters when external validation seems unreachable. Front offices wonder how to compete for attention when the league's spotlight is already claimed. These are not emotional reactions, they are strategic concerns. The league's expansion plans complicate things further. New teams entering the WNBA will arrive in an environment already shaped by this imbalance. They will need stars immediately, or risk being sidelined in the narrative economy. Development takes time. Attention does not. Owners know this, which is why the pressure to secure marketable players has intensified. Some franchises are already pivoting. They are chasing marketability as aggressively as talent. Draft boards shift. Branding conversations influence roster decisions. Basketball remains central, but it is no longer alone. That evolution reflects reality, but it also raises ethical questions about fairness and opportunity. But guess what? The league cannot slow down without losing momentum. Owners understand that too. The WNBA stands at a crossroads where caution and ambition collide. Lean too far into one star and you risk alienating the rest. Spread attention too evenly and you risk losing the surge that Clark has generated. There is no clean solution. What makes this moment explosive is timing. Collective bargaining negotiations, expansion discussions, and shifting media deals all converge as Clark's influence peaks. Decisions made now will define the league's structure for years. Owners betting heavily on one outcome are gambling not just with money, but with trust. Some fans frame this as jealousy or resistance to change. That framing is too simple. This is about power distribution. It is about who benefits when growth finally arrives and who pays the price. The WNBA's challenge is not whether Caitlin Clark is worth the investment. She is. The challenge is whether the league can grow around her without shrinking everywhere else. The uncomfortable truth is that some teams are already being left behind, not because they lack talent or effort, but because attention is finite. When it clusters, it excludes. That exclusion shapes careers, markets, and fan bases in ways that are hard to reverse. Hold on, because the real test comes next. If Clark continues to elevate the league, owners will feel justified. If injuries, fatigue, or market shifts intervene, the concentration of risk will become painfully clear. Either way, the decisions being made now cannot be undone easily. This is not a story about one player dominating headlines. It is a story about a league learning what happens when growth finally arrives and everyone scrambles to control it. Caitlin Clark did not just change the game on the court, she changed how the business thinks, moves, and bets. And some teams are realizing too late that they were never part of that bet. The WNBA is growing faster than ever, but growth always reveals who is protected and who is expendable. As owners push all in on Caitlin Clark, the league must decide whether winning big is worth leaving others behind. Caitlin Clark did not just change the game on the court, she changed how the business thinks, moves, and bets. And some teams are realizing too late that they were never part of that bet. The WNBA is growing faster than ever, but growth always reveals who is protected and who is expendable. As owners push all in on Caitlin Clark, the league must decide whether winning big is worth leaving others behind.